Welcome to Graphic Policy Radio. We're back with our Venture Brothers podcast, the Venture Brothers podcast. Do you love the Venture Brothers cartoon, but are afraid of missing the myriad of historical references and layers of meaning behind each episode? Join pop culture and history experts, me, Elana Levin, aka Elana Brooklyn, and Stephen Attewell, whose secret identity is that he's an actual historian, for our podcast examining each episode of Season 7 of the hit Adult Swim show. Today's episode is about Season 7, Episode 1, The Venture Brothers and the Curse of the Haunted Problem. We usually describe the Venture Brothers show thusly. The Venture Brothers cartoon on Adult Swim references everything from Hanna-Barbera to Marvel, David Bowie to the Big Bopper, cult cinema to Scorsese, Oscar Wilde to Henry Kissinger. The show's central theme is failure. The reality of life and the promises and optimism of the 60s space age have faded, but also the positive value of failure as a way to learn and grow, of making unpleasant realities better, and whether you can learn to keep the joyfulness of youth without its illusions. We podcasted Season 6, which you can listen to from the Graphic Policy website, from SoundCloud. There's a playlist of it, and you guys might want to catch up listening to that if you haven't given it a listen yet. Our Series 6 podcast of Venture Brothers Season 6, was actually one of the most popular things Graphic Policy has ever done on the podcast. So I want to thank you guys for being our listeners, and here's to having an even more successful season 7. So thanks for joining me, my co-host Stephen Attewell. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. This was an interesting episode, especially as sort of a season opener. It felt sort of a little bit thrown into the regular swing of a season.
You know, last season didn't have a real ending in some ways. It had a crescendo episode at the end that was really a high note where a lot of things came together, but so many plot lines were left hanging that this does kind of feel like the continuation of the last season.
Yeah.
It's been, I guess it's been about 2.5 years since we've last had Venture Brothers.
Good Lord.
I know. I thought about doing a rewatch, but I haven't had time to do that yet.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel about the long wait between the seasons? I just want to talk about that.
I mean, obviously I kind of want it to be done right. It is kind of, on the other hand, like the fact that it is so long between seasons, and that apparently this season is going to be like 5 episodes.
Oh.
That I think it does have kind of an effect on the storytelling. It's kind of, in this case, weirdly decompressed, whereas you'd normally expect it to be the opposite, of trying to tie up everything. Well, I mean, I guess there were two big things in this episode that were sort of big tie-up stuff. But it does mean, I think it affects the amount of time there's available for build-up and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it definitely impacts how people relate to the show. It feels like characters have been in a certain period of their lives even longer than they have been, even more of a moving, extending timeline than I think we're used to from comics, because it's literally the same week, probably, as it was 2.5 years ago, right? And I don't think it prevents me from enjoying the show in any way, but it definitely is something that impacts how we read it.
Yeah.
So, overall, I mean, did you feel like this was a strong episode?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. As I said, it was kind of unexpected. Sort of, but, once I realized that the direction it was going with the horror movie vibes, I started to get more into it. There was some sort of, pretty good, what I always like is character interactions and riffs. And then some really interesting character work on Hank's part. Dean didn't get quite as much to do, but I did like the mansplaining, science-splaining thing, although we'll get to that later.
I mean, I definitely think that this was I don't know if there's really been a bad episode of the show. I think this was a good episode, but not a great one. But I suspect that I'll feel differently when the arc wraps up. I mean, this is supposed to be part 1 of a 3-episode arc, presumably dealing with well, we're just going to say spoilers from here on out, guys, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Spoilers. And so, with the return of Jonas Venture Sr.'s body and what that means, and the
What's
problem
left of it.
The problem is his body. The problem is the legacy of Jonas Venture Sr. So I think I bet you I'll like this episode more at the end of the next couple episodes once I've seen it all. Because I guess just for me, I'm always a sucker for when the show goes into references that I have particularly strong emotional attachments to. And while there were lots of references here, it wasn't quite as much of my obsessive bailiwick as something like maybe No Go was from the last season, or the Warhol meets the Warhol meets the Legion of Doom episode, which were both basically written for me personally, as is clear to anyone. But it was fun and good to see the Order of the Triad back again.
Oh, yeah.
So let's kind of go through this from and I also just want to shout out that the detailed richness of the animation and quality itself is just really unsurpassed by anything I see on TV.
So we open with an extended Exorcist 2 riff. It took me a little bit to figure out what was going on here exactly. I was like, is this Indiana Jones? Like, what kind of vaguely Orientalist genre are we working with here? But the moment I saw the statue of Pazuzu, the Demon of Flies, I was like, okay, I know what we're going for.
Yeah, I haven't seen The Exorcist 2, but
no one needs to.
I was very my husband was right there and looked at me and said, "That's from The Exorcist 2." I was like, "Oh, okay." My reference for Pazuzu is it's the name of the gargoyle that the professor had on Futurama, so it's kind of a different frame of reference there. I was really struck watching the intro. It's anything that's a flashback in the show is particularly inclined to being a style parody of Johnny Quest TV show. And I was particularly struck with this one at how super racist it feels. I mean, it is a parody of a racist show. It's poking fun of it, but in this particular moment, it felt actually also racist. Like, the way the show has often undermined racism in those ways is by showing how wrong it is, showing that these characters who are treated as being less than the white characters are actually smarter than them or have their own stories and thoughts happening. And in this case, it didn't really have that. It just had, a brown character in a turban speaking what I don't actually think is a language.
Yeah, no, it sounded like just nonsense.
And I'm fine with, easy for me to say this, I'm like a white person, I'm fine with the show having riffs off that, but you have to undermine those archetypes and you have to undermine those stereotypes if you're going to be playing in that field. And they didn't do that here. They really didn't. So I thought that was kind of shitty. Moving along. So I was thinking, when we see Jonas Jr. in there, discovering the problem part of Gargantua 1, that they're talking about the radiation levels. This is how Jonas Jr. gets cancer.
Yeah, that kind of fits with the whole theme of like the poisoned legacy of the Venture family. That Jonas Jr. was all about like paying tribute and homage to and like trying to emulate his father, and it's like all of that went horribly wrong, right? Gargantua 2 had to be jettisoned into space. And now, like, Gargantua 1 is just literally poisonous. I was really surprised by the Da Vinci Code reference. That was unexpected, but kind of fits the, like, overall vibe.
Can you explain the Da Vinci Code
Robert
reference?
Langdon is the, like, author stand-in for all of the Da Vinci Code novels, the fake quote-unquote symbologist. It's not a real discipline.
What
from Harvard that Tom Hanks plays in all the movies.
Okay, but what was he in this? Like, who is our
He
character?
was just mentioned. He was like, my God, Robert Langdon, or I forget what the line was exactly, but it was like something along the lines of, you don't need to be Robert Langdon to know what this means, or something like that.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
And especially in this case, because it's like such a super obvious, it's like, oh, right, that's this spaceship, and this was the machine that was on this spaceship.
Yeah, Gargantua 1 was the spaceship that Careers in Science took place in.
Yeah, which was like, what, the second ever episode? I mean, this is a really deep cut.
And it's one of the most popular ones. It's the one with Phantom Spaceman.
Yeah.
It really was the episode that established the characters in a lot of ways. So I was just struck so much in a number of ways throughout this episode. Obviously, we've always known that the red problem, light dome, and all that looks like HAL from 2001: Space Oddity. But there actually were other references to that as well, which I'll get into later. And I love that it's called the problem, because again, the problem is the legacy of his father. So even if we didn't find out the revelation that we see later this episode, it still works as a name, right?
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this episode is it really makes you think about the previous episode, that because one of the things that happens in that episode is Rusty has this conversation / hallucination with the ghost of his father, and like in the wake of this episode, I'm now rethinking that conversation and like, what did it mean, and like, did it happen?
This is a show where I think that we have that there's going to be a mix of things that were always intended from the start and things that they worked out later. They said, the creators said, that they rewatched the whole series before working on this one. I think what you're pointing to I think these revelations in terms of his relationship with his father might actually be stuff that was planned from the very beginning, but there's other things that I don't think were, because I don't know that they expected to have this many seasons of the show made, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really loved this callback. And I love when they talk about, as men of science, we clearly don't believe in ghosts, is such in the spirit of, the scientists' characters that they're riffing off of from other pieces of pop culture.
Yeah, and it's especially weird in this context because like Rusty has seen his whole sort of like uber atheist man of science thing, which harkens back to what was the episode where he gets into the duel with Dr. Orpheus?
I don't remember the name, but I remember it.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of that episode, just because like, at this point he really should know better. So they install the machine in their house, and immediately starts fucking with them. Rusty can't fix his alarm clock, and all of a sudden there is, what's the song that's playing?
Street Life.
Okay.
Street Life. Yeah, that was the show. Actually says that it's from Sharky's Machine, which is a movie that they'd made jokes about earlier.
In fact, in Careers in Science, that Sharky's Machine was the movie that Phantom Spaceman lured all of the astronauts on Gargantua 1 to their deaths with.
Holy cow. Well, Street Life is a song by the Crusaders. It's very catchy. You definitely have heard it before.
Yeah.
Like, listen to it after this, and you're going to say, oh, that song.
Yeah, so in terms of, like, the horror movie stuff, Dean gets... I did not catch this initially, but he gets problem written backwards on his stomach.
Which is Exorcist, but the fact that it was written backwards is like Red Rum from The Shining, right?
So they're going all over the place. Helper is full of rats.
That was a gorgeous, scary, gross visual. Yeah,
that felt very the sort of like epic green vomit from The Exorcist, sort of taken to the next level. And yeah, you're right in these notes. I read a review that pointed me in the wrong direction as to how Hank is reacting to all of this.
Yeah. So from Helper vomiting rats, we cut to a scene of Hank in his girlfriend Serena's room, sneaking around, and Hank is someone who has experienced some very bizarre sexual trauma that they also have tried to wipe from his mind. Yes. In ways that I think were actually worse than leaving it be alone, frankly. Trying to understand and parse out what that would mean for his response to being in a sexual situation with someone who he does have feelings for is hard to say, but it seems pretty clear to me as I watched it that he basically came when she tried to take his shirt off, and that's extreme, and might explain why she had to change her shirt. So there you go. I really appreciate him saying he was trying to think of zombies from the living dead in order to hold off a little bit. And then he thought of Michonne, and that counteracted it. So I appreciate Hank being a Michonne fanboy, because I think he would find a strong woman like her attractive, and that's the proper analysis to have.
And I have to say, Serena is definitely one of my favorite characters added from season 6. That there's something about the way that her accent plays off against all of the other characters around there. Especially like her pervy bodyguard, her dad. It works so well.
Yeah, she does. I forgot who the voice actress is, but it's great, and she really is a fun addition to the cast.
So then everyone's sort of discussing what's going on. Rusty is continuing to disbelieve everything. He's got that great line about being haunted by Clippy.
Yeah, just for folks who are too young to know. So when when they're saying, "Well, you saw a vision of your brother," that's how you know that you're being haunted. Rusty points out that he just saw a projection from the alarm clock, and if seeing unwanted animated images means you're haunted, then he's being haunted by Clippy the Paperclip. So Clippy the Paperclip is an animated paperclip that used to pop up in Word whenever you tried to do anything. It was super annoying. Word is a word processor piece of software, kids.
Yeah, I was going to say, when was Clippy... so Clippy was introduced in Windows 97.
So, yes.
And was phased out in 2003, 2004 because everyone hated him.
Got it. Well, that's totally my era. So, yeah. I also appreciate that Hank clearly watches Scooby-Doo.
Oh, Hank lives Scooby-Doo.
Like, Hank is Scooby-Doo, but that doesn't mean that he watches Scooby-Doo, right? Sometimes, like, if something's a pastiche of it, it doesn't actually exist in that world.
Yeah, but I just meant in the sense that, like, him defaulting to old lighthouse keeper in a rubber mask yet, like, that's probably because he's dealt with lighthouse keepers in rubber masks.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So he doesn't watch Scooby-Doo necessarily. He just actually lives Scooby-Doo. That's
true.
I mean, they had like a good Scooby-Doo episode.
They dealt
in season
with
1 or something.
The pirate captain in the Sargasso Sea. They dealt with the Manson family as the Groovy Gang. Like, he's been through some shit. He knows when to look for the rubber mask.
So let's talk about Hackers.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so Hackers was a hacking movie from the 90s, back when people really didn't understand what hacking was. Somehow they thought it involved roller skates. But it gave us some really great cheesy lines, hack the planet. Anytime anyone references like jacking into a node to destroy the host or any nonsense of that variety, they're usually quoting Hackers. It was a very early Angelina Jolie film, actually.
Mm-hmm. The movies still don't seem to understand what hackers do.
Well, as Billy and Pete talk about later, there's like an inherent reason for that. But yep. I do like that. That's like the binary for this episode is like, are they being haunted or are they being hacked? So
Hank gets fired by Serena's bodyguard, or rather, Hank is fired from his pizzeria job because the pizzeria is owned by the mafia that's run by Wilde, the dad of Serena.
Right. Which gives us an opportunity for some really good Godfather 2 riffs.
I mean, they literally play the theme song, right?
Yeah.
What else from Godfather 2 is in here?
So the sort of like side-scrolling shot where Hank is walking down the street and his boss comes out to like give him a pizza is pretty much like a one-for-one of a similar side-scrolling shot where after Robert De Niro gets fired, his boss comes with a box of groceries.
Oh, wow. That is quite it.
So, yeah. Although, as far as I can tell, the Godfather 2 scene did not end with the vandalization of his, I guess it would be a car.
His hover... It's like a hover wheel bar. You know what? It looks like the little hover wheelie things from Men in Black 2.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's what Hank's been driving.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to Dean's one.
I don't know.
But Hank's been making use of it as a delivery boy.
I also, just pointing to some more backgrounds, the interior of the pizzeria is just completely correct. Like, I have been in that restaurant in Little Italy. It exists.
Hopefully not with very beefy guys dressed up in prawn costumes.
I mean, probably
acting menacingly.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Had those paintings too.
Yes.
So Dean actually is the one who calls on the Order of the Triad.
Yes. This is where like he just gets sort of fed up with his dad's
denial.
Yeah, and just sort of like selfish assholishness in general. You had caught the license plate. I completely missed this.
The license plate says BLD VSSL, which is blood vessel. It's Jefferson's car, so Jefferson Twilight.
And I did love the whole thing of Dr. Orpheus has astrally projected ahead because they were stuck in traffic on the FDR Drive. So the other two members of the Order of the Triad have to haul his like stony form around until they get to like the actual, the bodies link up again, except they're clearly more interested in the like rooftop pool than actually dealing with demonic possession.
Hey, it's heated.
Yeah. I did love, like, Serena goes off on Wide Whale for interfering with her relationship, and then does get to, like, the inherent logical flaw in all of those, like, hyper-protective, patriarchal nonsense ideas, which is, like, if you're not allowed to date anyone, because they're not family, are you then supposed to date your family? And as she put it, pump out some flipper babies with her cousin with a lazy eye. There's House Lannister is not a model to follow.
Serena really is sort of like a normal person who's stuck in a Venture Brothers reality.
Well, I mean, she's a normal person for like a mobster princess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, she definitely knows what kind of family she's in and has no... She can breathe underwater, right?
Oh, I think she can.
That's her
thing? She can.
Yeah, so she's got, like, some superpowers. It's just not super, kind of hardcore. So, you had a note here about Brock, who decides to move into a tent in the, on the roof because he's sick and tired of dealing with possession.
Yeah. So, I think this was his outfit last season, too, and I just didn't put two and two together. Because his outfit, his hoodie and shorts and sweatpants, that's Rocky Balboa's outfit in Rocky. Like, that is actually what Rocky wears with that little knit helmet. I think it's because I saw Rocky being used in the clip that Netroots Nation used to promote the fact that our conference is going to be in Philadelphia next year. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's Rocky's outfit, which is a great fit for Brock Sampson, obviously.
Gotcha. And this is where we get science-splaining versus mansplaining, which is, kind of works because usually it's I mean, if someone is science-plaining, it's usually a man doing it. So.
Sad to say. Yeah.
And this is where we get into one of my favorite parts of the episode, which is Billy and Pete riffing on hacker movies and the fact that, hacking is just not a cinematic activity. It's typing.
I also love that the show sort of pointed out that not all scientists are the same. It's in comics in particular, you have these scientist characters who are experts in literally every discipline, and that's not how it works. So I appreciated the show emphasizing that Pete's the hacker and Billy is a neurogeneticist, and that these are not the same thing.
Yes, although Billy is also a
medical
surgeon?
Doctor. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say. I mean, although that's linked to neurogenetics.
Yeah. It's not quite as random as Pete being a surgeon or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he does the medical stuff. Pete, is functional with computers. Right. So this is Hank's plan A, which is to just go in there and try to see if he can start his relationship up again.
Hank with Serena. It's just the charm offensive. He's going to bring her a pizza that's shaped like a heart.
Yeah. Just sort of act like nothing has changed.
And I appreciate the specific threat from the chief whale lice bodyguard, who say they're going to zap him in the brajol. For those who are not initiated in the ways of Italian food, a brajol is a beef cutlet, sometimes pork, pounded very thin, and it's wrapped around some herbs and cheese and then cooked together. It's really fabulous. I get one for Christmas with the in-laws. So that's what a brajol is. We're here to help.
Gotcha. So I imagine getting hit in a brajol would not be great.
No.
So then we go to the Ritual of Revelation, which just sort of brings up every ghost that has any reason to hate the Venture Brothers, or the Venture family, as it were, which is a bit of a problem because they've sort of hit a target-rich environment. Going back to the sort of the Orientalist, man of science thing from before, the Venture family does nothing but sort of abuse non-white people and working class people, as it turns out. So you get a whole bunch of different groups of people who want their artifacts back, except now they don't know which they are. This is, I believe, the first episode of the show that's come out since the Doctor Strange movie was released. And when the Venture Brothers, began having a Doctor Strange-based character, they had played off the fact that people didn't really know who the heck Doctor Strange was. Oh, it's a Dracula. But right. Now everyone knows who Doctor Strange is. So I'm wondering if that's going to impact how people react to Dr. Orpheus as a character. The fans, rather, not people within the show. Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on that. I think we'll know something is up if there is various, if his cloak starts moving on its own, if there's any reference to him being British, that kind of thing.
So you identified one of the historic sources of ghosts.
Oh, yes. So the Venture Millinery Factory fire is a reference to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, in that they were both caused ultimately by the greed of the owner operator of the factory. In this case, a millinery is, I believe, a maker of hats.
Yeah, maker of hats, and that's why they said a dumpster full of felt scraps was hit by a zeppelin, because you can't possibly get more period than that.
Yeah, and especially, felt goes up just, instantly. I mean, it's just a fire trap. Especially because in that time period especially, they probably were treating it with mercury. So, not just a fire, but like a toxic fire.
I think folks might not know the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, so do you want to give it the one?
Yes.
The one line?
So, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was probably the most famous industrial accident in American history. In 1911, There was a fire in which basically the workers couldn't escape because the stairwells and exits were locked, and the fire department ladders couldn't get up enough stories, and 123 women and 23 men died from a combination of fire, smoke inhalation, or basically jumping to their deaths. And it was a sort of a media sensation because, I mean, it literally happened like blocks away from where the New York newspaper district is. They were low-paid workers, and, who had just died horribly, and it led to, because you had, women like Frances Perkins, who were, almost immediately on the scene, it led to a raft of factory legislation, eventually sort of culminating in the New Deal's labor legislation. So.
Yeah, it's really the birth of fire safety laws, workplace safety laws, and was really central to the expansion of the Garment Workers Union, my old employer. Yep, and it's so real that the family that has benefited so much from being these like science innovators actually got the start of its capital off the backs of literally killing workers.
Yeah, that works perfectly. That was sort of my favorite detail from the episode. So we then go to Hank's plan B, which is to bring back Enrico Matassa, which is one of my favorite of Hank's personas. This was from the episode Mama's Boys.
I don't even remember that one.
This is it was an episode about Hank's band.
Oh.
And it's where Hank, what's his name? Dermot, and Henchman 21 decide to start up, like they basically decide to rob banks. And in order to get themselves sent to an insane asylum for complicated reasons. Anyway, but Enrico Matassa is Hank's Latin lover villain archetype who like hits people with t-shirts, I guess. And it's like really dumb because it's him in a fake mustache, but like his hair is still blonde. And he doesn't speak Italian, so it's just ridiculous. And it's especially ridiculous because Matassa means Hank. Like, as in a hank of hair or wool or something like that. So it's just like the dumbest fake name, fake persona, and it works. Like that's the most hilarious bit, is he actually succeeds in breaking into White Whale's compound, and like, he probably could have killed White Whale if he'd intended to.
Right, which he didn't. He doesn't want to kill her dad because that would be messed up. Also, he's not a killer. Also, I think Enrico is also Hank.
So it's Hank.
I think it's Hank, yes.
Oh my God, Hank, you...
I want to just go back real quick because you pointed out some stuff from when the show did a brief cutaway.
Oh, yeah. So because Billy is not a computer guy, he goes to his mom's place, and it turns out that his mom, Action Man, and Colonel Gentleman are swingers, which is gross, and that Horace Gentleman's dog is a racist, which of course it is, because he is.
Yes, exactly.
Because Sean Connery is not exactly the world's most enlightened man.
No, there really have been studies, like dogs' behaviors reflect who their owner, the physical body language of their owners. So, like, I don't know, if you have a rescue dog and it lived 8 years of its life with someone who's racist and your dog is still racist, that's probably not your fault. But if you've raised your dog from puppyhood and it's racist, it's because you're racist. It's following your body language.
Right. So the former Team Venture associates instantly, the moment he mentions Sharky's machine, know what the deal is, and trank dart his mom, which is kind of a dick move. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there.
I guess they didn't want her to be involved.
Yeah, it's probably some sort of, like, vow of secrecy or whatever.
I mean, they still shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I also just feel like, for the sake of our listeners, I would want to say that your mom being a swinger in your house in which you're trying to come home to is a legitimate complaint, but I don't want people to think that the show necessarily itself has an attitude on people's personal lives and sexual choices. But, like, put a sock on the door, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's more just the issue of clearly they're using the living room.
Yeah, not appropriate.
And not, using any sort of scheduling.
Do you think that they're living in Long Island? I'm just trying. We've established that he lives near the Red Death, and the Red Death is on Long Island, or am I just making assumptions? We know the Red Death is on Long Island. I think that Billy's family is on Long Island too. But
let me see. Billy Quizboy and his mom is. What about his mom?
Well, we can come back to that, but yeah, that's...
I don't think it's ever established. It's
okay.
Just we know that, like, she's also an ex-superhero, so... She was what was her name? The Triple Threat? That can't be it. Oh, yeah, she was...
It's like a Broadway-themed...
Yeah, she was the... Oh, that's right, because she was a dancer. Okay.
A triple threat is someone who could act, sing, and dance.
Gotcha. And do it backwards in heels.
Yes.
So we go from there to the big revelation of the episode, which is that... Do you want to do this one?
That Jonas Venture is inside the problem machine. Because Jonas Venture is the problem. Or at least his head is. His head and a few of his key blood vessels are, like, wired into this machine. It's a very, very Jack Kirby-looking machine, and particularly reminds me of the art that Jack Kirby did when he did a series of comics that were about the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. One of the issues is basically shot for shot the movie, but then subsequent episodes really take it forward, and I feel like he looks a lot like Machine Man as drawn there by Jack Kirby.
Yeah, and definitely seems like the machine has not quite been working.
No.
In that it was supposed to bring him back from death, basically, which, how appropriate is that, like, one of his last functioning machines is all about, preserving life long beyond where you should. Because, like, he's got what looks like a rudimentary nervous system and blood vessels, but, like, clearly the bringing the body back has not functioned.
So we haven't seen the problem machine since Gargantua 1?
No.
Okay, gotcha. One thing that really struck me was when the Action Man finally comes and identifies what it is to everyone. He says that it was made in case of his death. And there literally is, like, a pause in how he's delivering that line. It was an interesting emphasis. It makes me wonder about...
Yeah, well, Dr. there was the whole business... I don't remember whether it was last season or the season before about Dr. Venture's or Dr. Venture Senior's, like, interest in cloning technology and, like, cyborgs, because there's the whole, like, story that's still speculation about, like, what happened to the Monarch's dad.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, is it possible that he is Venturetron?
Yeah. Which I think is probably true, but not something I'm completely set on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just really love how clear it is that, like, problem is the physical manifestation of the problem of the legacy of the Venture family's relationship to science and parenting. It's just such a perfect thing. Really, really damn smart.
That they can't let the past go.
I also, when Dr. Orpheus shouts, "It is the devil's concubine," I went to Google it because I was like, this has got to be a reference. And it is. It's a book series.
Oh, yeah. It's used a lot, though. I think especially it's funny because it's like Helper is the devil's concubine. It's just the two halves don't mesh very well. In the other, like... Oh, and we should say, like, the thing that kind of did surprise me, and this is what I kind of mean by, like, the like foreshortening that we're getting a little bit is when Pete all of a sudden takes an axe to Jonas Venture. I was like, holy shit, that's a really big deal for the show. Like, Jonas Venture, I mean, literally has been like the presence looming over the show from the, you know, Careers of Science onwards, and like now all of a sudden he's gone, and it wasn't even anything that had to, like, Rusty barely did anything this episode.
Yeah.
You know, the actual Venture brothers barely did anything this episode. And, you know, I mean, good for Pete for, you know, for lateral thinking. But, you know, that really did kind of surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect that it's actually not dead, and now it's just going to malfunction even further, but...
Yeah, because nothing ever dies.
Nothing ever dies. That's so true.
And then the other thing that really surprised me in this episode is that, you know, when the Wide Whale gets taken in by Hank's dumb disguise, his, like, initiation ceremony is that he wants Hank to kill the Blue Morpho, who he has captured, which is, like, that's again, another big surprise, right?
Yeah.
The whole last season was all about, like, the mystery of the Blue Morpho. And all of a sudden it seems like, you know, wrapped up rather, you know, suddenly.
Yeah, these were two really shocking reveals in the series. So, I also just want to, for anybody who's a new listener and maybe didn't listen last season, which of our podcast, just to make sure folks don't miss it, that Wide Whale is a reference to Kingpin from Spider-Man and Daredevil comics. Like, the suit is literally Kingpin's suit, and he certainly has his physique, except he's whalier. And then this was also
a blowhole.
and a blowhole, and he's gray. I also that the Venture Brothers HQ in New York is the Baxter Building from Fantastic Four, which is great because they've always been playing around with the color of the Fantastic Four blue.
And the whole super science and the, you know, guy with the pipe is an asshole. Mm-hmm. There's actually two different guys with pipes who are assholes, come to think of it.
I think you should just assume that any guy with a pipe is an asshole.
No offense to actual people with pipes.
I really love the Uber driver. Like when it pulls back and you see the car like wheeling backwards out of the lobby.
Yeah.
That was so real. You know, even the Uber driver has his limits.
Yeah, well, you know, hopefully with the pending regulatory decision by the New York Taxi and Livery Commission, you know, his time will be a little bit more valuable to him, and he won't have to take these kind of fares that could end in his horrible, horrible death.
Could not have said it better myself. So with that, I believe those are all of our notes we had for this episode.
Yep.
So thank you all for joining us. We're going to be back next week to go over the next episode. We'll be doing one podcast episode per episode of the show. You can find us online. I'm on Twitter all the goddamn time at ELANA_Brooklyn. That's Elana_Brooklyn. It's a great place to find me. And of course, the show exists on graphicpolicy.com, our website. It'll be loaded up there, and we're also throwing it up on our iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher eventually. And where can we find you, Stephen?
You can find me on Twitter at Stephen Attewell, or you can find me on WordPress or Tumblr at Race for the Iron Throne.
Excellent, excellent. Well, do you guys have any thoughts? Share them with us. We'd love to hear from you. Have a great week, and keep it geeky.
Go Team Venture!
Go Team Venture!
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.